Allow us this divine opportunity to introduce you to not just an ordinary 19-year-old young man, but a 19-year-old miracle sent from heaven to bless you and I through a musical instrument called a piano. His name is Wes Neighbors. He is from Lebanon, Tennessee. And if you know Wes, then you know that what you're listening to is his dream come true. If you don't know Wes, then let his father tell you a little bit about him and how his gift of playing piano was given just for you.
When I first married, I prayed that God would send me a son first. I didn't know how many kids we was going to have, but I prayed that he'd send me a son. And he honored that and gave me that. But when Wesley was first born, the umbilical cord was wrapped around Wesley's throat. And you know how they had the monitors and stuff hooked up, they could hear the heartbeat, and I was sitting there. I was so excited about the time he was going to be born, and I was listening to his heartbeat, and then I heard nothing. And I went out and got the nurse, and I was more in a panic than anybody, I guess. And the nurse came in, I said, I don't hear a heartbeat anymore. I said, I hadn't heard it, and I was concerned. And they said that his heart had stopped beating. And when they got him, the cord was wrapped twice around his throat, and he had choked to death. And when he was born, he was completely dead. And I cried, and I said, Lord, I know you sent him here for a reason, because you gave me my heart's desire. And I said, he needs your touch. And this little bitty old blonde nurse laid him on that table, and she started working with him. And it took a few minutes, and I was standing over there praying. Everybody was talking, and I was looking. And I seen that little belly going up and down. I thought, there he is. That's my boy right there. I was so proud. And I'm proud of him today, because I know he's a great man of God, and I think he's going to touch a lot of people's lives by his music and his ministry and his witness. He's had a really good witness, and I'm proud of it. And he's had every test ran. He's been to Vanderbilt, St. Thomas, UMC, Summit. He's been to all the hospitals around, and they ran tests on him from head to toe, and they say they can't figure it out. They don't know what it is. And I think myself, personally, I think Satan's trying to attack him because he knows that he's going to win souls to Christ. And he's mad about it because he's a soldier for God. Satan knows he can't do anything to him. God's got him in his hands and he's control. And when he was born and he came right out of the hospital, we went to church that Sunday. And I was so tickled to death that God had given me a baby son. I was just overwhelmed. And I was sitting in the pew, and I was holding him, and he was facing me. And the Lord spoke to me. And he said, you know, I gave him to you to bless you. And I felt very blessed. And I said, Lord, he's not mine, he's yours. You gave him to me, but he belongs to you. You just let me borrow him. So I walked down to the altar, and I laid him down on that altar, and I said, Lord, thank you. But he is your child, and I want you to bless him and touch him and make him a soldier for you, because he's yours. And from that moment on, Wesley's been a blessing to me and everybody that's ever come in touch with him. He's always been a good child. He's been very respectful, and you could feel the love poured out of him on to other people. Something that most people don't have. Wesley had that. It was a gift came down from God. I know it was. And when I was in the house singing. I was a song leader at a church, and Wesley was 4 years old, about 4.5. And I had this so little bitty keyboard, it probably wasn't worth $10. And Wesley was beating on that little thing. He was poking at the keys. And I just went on about my duties in the house. And I got to singing Amazing Grace. And that was one of my favorite songs because it talks about how amazing God really is. We lived in a split level house, and I was walking from the bottom level to the top level, and I heard Wesley making on that little keyboard, little video thing. You'd have to see it. You would laugh. But it couldn't carry a tune if you played a tune. And if you knew how to play, you could. I mean, it just was just a little old nothing. Just something to play with. I started going up the second half of that split level, and I heard the first chorus of Amazing Grace. And I stopped where I was. Before I went up those steps, I turned around and I said, now Lord, was I really hearing what I was hearing? And I could hear Wesley typing in on that Amazing Grace, and it sounded good.
And he was how old?
He was 4.5. And I stopped, and I said, well, I'm going to sing that one more time. I started singing it again, and I stopped. Wesley played it again. And I know at that point in time he was listening to me sing. So I go out into the little playroom, and I said, hey, Wesley. I said, what were you playing on that keyboard just then? He goes, well, Daddy. He had this little bitty country voice. He goes, well, Daddy. He said, you were just singing it. And I said, well, what was it? He goes, Amazing Grace. And I said, well, do it again. So he played it. And I mean, I couldn't even see him. I had tears so full in my eyes, and it blessed me. And from that moment on, Wesley played and played and played, and he finally played that whole song through. Every verse, he played it on that little board. I said, I'm buying him a piano. So we got him one of these old Westbrook. It fell apart because he played it so good. And yes, and he turned 5, and my aunt had a little birthday party for one of her grandchildren, and she also played the piano, and she played by music. And I was so excited, and I told everybody, I said, you got to hear Wesley play this piano. I said, he can play. And everybody, yeah, he's 4 years old, 5, you know, sure he can. So we were invited to go to that birthday party, and we went over there, and my aunt, I told her I was excited because she played the piano. I wanted her to know Wesley could play too. And I said, Aunt Becky, I said, you know, Wesley knows how to play the piano. She says, oh, really? And I said, yes, he really does. And she looked at Wesley, and Wesley, you know, 5 years old, wasn't 3 foot tall, says, can he now? And says, no, Wesley, can you play a piano? And he said, yes, ma'am. And I said, well, he can play Amazing Grace, and it's wonderful. I said, he plays it his own way. I said, but it's really good. You have to listen to it. She goes, well, I got this nice keyboard, and I'll hook it up. And Wesley, if you can play all of Amazing Grace, I'll give you that nice keyboard. And I said, Aunt Becky, please don't tell him that if you don't mean it, because he can really play it. And she goes, okay, he's fixing to. So she sets it up, sets it on her table, pulls the chairs back, and says, Wesley, here you go, play it. Well, he played it just like you see on that tape, that he just exactly alike. And my aunt, tears just started pouring out of her face, and she just started crying and crying. And she said, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I said, what's wrong, Aunt Becky? I said, are you upset because he blessed you by playing that, or are you upset because you're going to have to give up that keyboard? And she looked at me and she goes, well, a little of both. But from that point on, Wesley had started playing, and he's always played gospel music. He's always played, and his heart just was in the gospel. And he's blessed everybody. I mean, he's blessed me. I could sit all day long and listen to him.
After this commercial is over, you'll have free will to purchase his CD on his website, wesneighbors.com. That's WESNABORS.com. And then you can share this with someone you know, so they too can be touched. Whether if you play his CD in your car, bring it to church and use it as an instrumental service music, or just listening to it around the house. Your part in sharing this musical masterpiece will be a blessing to Wes and his family and to everyone it reaches.